Greetings and welcome to Outlaw Gamer Radio, the official podcast of OutlawGamers.com. This is the show where we live to play and play to live. I'm Brent Adams, joined by a man who thinks Portal Stories has something to do with a seedy truck stop in southern Pennsylvania, Mr. Lauren Baumgarten. Lauren!
What is up, Brent Adams? How are you, my friend?
What's going on, man?
That's a good one. That was a good one.
Thank you.
It's funny because it's true.
Yeah, exactly. The funny ones always are. That's why we laugh.
It's very funny, but I'm excited what it's referring to this week. How the hell are you?
I'm doing great, man, and I'm also excited to talk about not only the story that we've already foreshadowed, but all of the stories in media. And it is a media heavy garage section this week. You know, we normally mix it up with news and stuff like that, but it's all trailers all the time in the garage this week. And so I propose we go ahead and kick things off right now with the aforementioned Portal Stories reference. There's a new Portal mod coming to Steam Greenlight on March 1st, right? That's what they're saying right now?
Uh-huh.
And it is called Portal Stories: Mel. There's a trailer for it. It's on Steam. We're linking to it. It's on YouTube. And this may be the closest that we get to a Portal 3, which Valve has given us no indication that they're working on. But this mod has been in development for 3 years, and boy does it show. It's pretty impressive in terms of its scope, its level of detail, and certainly there's quite a bit of buzz about how much how good this is going to be. Did they give any kind of indication of? I'm trying to remember. I thought I read somewhere about how much gameplay time that there might be. In going through this, and I'm struggling to remember it now.
They did. But, they said anywhere between 4 and 12 hours, depending on how much time it takes you to solve puzzles.
4 and 12 hours of more badass Portal action for free. That's right. I said for free. A good-looking trailer, though, man. Didn't you think?
Yeah, I'm excited. You know what they didn't show in the trailer is the voice work. Which
very true.
Is such a key part of Portal. The humor is so important, and so I'm very excited to see it is voiced. It is fully voiced, and so just an amazing amount of work for the community. And the Portal games, both of them are in my opinion, among the best games ever made, and they're so creative and fun and just so good in every way. And I'm super excited for this.
Yeah, I agree. If I were going to give those games review scores, they would be like 11 out of 10s and things like that.
Are you being a smartass? Are you trying to foreshadow?
Look, I just I have poo-pooed review scores for so long, and maybe I was wrong all this time. Like maybe I was wrong, and maybe I should just kind of embrace the review score thing, because I mean it seems to work, right? So anyway, the next trailer in the garage is an announced trailer for a game called White Knight. No K in that, right?
Correct.
No ketamine. But White Knight, Night. This is a title coming to PlayStation 4. I think it's also in March. I'm trying to remember the date at the end of the trailer. Anyway, I'll look that up while we're talking here. But anyway, for my money, probably the thing I'm most excited about in the garage this week.
Really?
Really stylistically cool and evocative game. Very unique graphic style. It is, think kind of like Sin City, the video game. Not shades of gray, but black and white, heavy outlines. It is it's got, major, I'm sorry, it's April 3rd this year. It's got major film noir, kind of overtones and things like that. But it's also, kind of like a spooky haunted house, maybe survival horror kind of game. I'm all about it. I really got into this trailer. I thought it looked awesome, very evocative. What did you think?
I agree, man. I mean, that's why I put it on there, obviously. I thought I love the noir style. I wish there were more games in the noir style.
Agree.
And this comes completely out of left field and is theoretically going to be out in a couple months. And I just think it looks super, super intriguing, and I can't wait to see more about it. I love. I think stylistically, it's really interesting. I mean, obviously, we need to know more about the gameplay, but this announcement trailer did exactly what it's supposed to do, which is that it has me super, super interested in the game.
Yeah, the particulars that we're seeing right here seem to involve, I guess, essentially the setup for the game, which is you driving along a dark road at night, and then suddenly a figure dashes through your headlights, and you swerve to avoid missing what looks like a woman and hit a tree, wind up at this abandoned old house, and then it seems we're seeing a lot of kind of exploration gameplay, and certainly the atmosphere and tension is pretty high in the trailer. I'm just like you, though. I'm dying to know more. It looks really, really cool.
Obviously, we won't have to wait too long, which I think is one of the coolest things about it.
Yes, this is the way I like it. The way I like it is, hey, here's a really cool game. You know what? It's coming out like in 2 months. That's what I like.
Indeed.
All right. The Order 1886 experience. Lauren, this one might take a little bit of setup, so why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Order 1886 experience is and why it's in the garage this week.
Yeah, I put it in because I think it's just really interesting as a piece of media, Brent. I think it's really, really well done. If you go to, I can't remember if, I think it's just the main page of the Order's, we have the link here, but if it's the Order's actual website.
Main website.
Yeah, and it really is an experience. And there's sort of a 10-part quote-unquote experience there where you can click on things and you can watch 4, 5, 6, 7-minute videos, which I think is... which are really, really nicely done. And then there's additional bonus content and more video if you want to watch it. If you go through all 10 steps, you get a PlayStation code for a downloadable dynamic theme, which will be available next Tuesday, the 17th. The game comes out next Friday, actually. It comes out, it's on the 20th, even in North America, which is odd. But that's how they're doing it, which is great. But I just think it's a really well done experience. If this is a game you're interested in, I feel like the website and with the energy that they put into creating a place for you to sort of immerse yourself in the game a little bit and learn about it before the game comes out, I feel like they did a really nice job. And I have to say, it's reinvigorated my interest in the game. Now, I am absolutely not going to buy this game until after it comes out, because I think the game looks unbelievably gorgeous, but there are definitely some gameplay questions I have, concerns I have about the game. They are
my thoughts also.
They are the review embargo is up on the 18th, so the review embargo is up a couple days before the game comes out. If my biggest concern is the behavior of the AI. That's my biggest concern in this game, honestly. The world looks fantastic, fantastically beautiful, interesting. The voice acting sounds stellar to me. The gameplay, while fairly standard, looks like it has some really interesting weapons and different takes on that. So for me, the real concern is the enemy AI and the pacing in the game. So I'm looking to hear some feedback specifically on that once the reviews are out. But I just think it was a really well done piece of media, Brent.
Yeah, I think that everything about the Order 1886 leaves me in a very sort of strange place, in that I do think that the game looks really interesting, but I can't quite decide if I really want to play it all that bad. I think that the thing that I'm most concerned about, just to sort of speak to the point you raised, is whether or not the game is going to feel too repetitive. I think I wonder about if it's just going to feel kind of like the same cover mechanic gunfight over and over and over and over again. And that's not to say that there's not games that, that's what Uncharted is.
Right, and that's one of the first things I thought of as you were saying that.
Yeah, that's not to say that if it's the same gunfight over and over and over again, that it can't be a good game. But I watch media and stuff for it, and I can't decide if I'm actually excited about it or not. So I also am kind of interested to see how people are responding to it after it comes out. I agree with you that it looks fantastic, really gorgeous game. Voice acting, as you said, sounds great. So for me, I think I need to find out if the pacing of the game, if the gameplay mechanics are deep and fulfilling enough to warrant a purchase or a rental, but just warrant the time investment to get through this game.
Yeah, we'll see. It's not too far off now, and I'm excited to see, Brent. I think the game has potential. I've just seen some things that are concerning, but it's from media that's at least a couple of months old, and so based on feedback, who knows what they've tweaked or again what we have seen or haven't seen. But so I'll be interested to see that.
And certainly the talent behind it is proven out before. So
absolutely.
All right, so this next one is all you, buddy.
Well, it is all me. I put it on there because specifically, not specifically, but I really wanted to know if this was at all interesting to you.
Yes and no. I mean, the kitsch factor is pretty cool. And rather than bury the lead, we're talking about an announcement trailer for a video game called Summer Camp, which has this very cool lo-fi retro. Think Far Cry 3 Blood Dragon in terms of the kind of nostalgia sort of feeling that you get for this. And certainly if Summer Camp evokes sort of imagery of late 70s, early 80s teen slasher flicks, then you got it on the money. And if you think that this genre needs a video game, and that if this genre needs a video game, then it must also include the participation of Tom Savini, then you've got the gold star for this week's episode of Outlaw Gamer Radio, because that is exactly what this motherfucker is.
I did not know who Tom. I certainly would not have known the name Tom Savini.
Oh, really? Yeah, Tom Savini's he's an actor.
Yeah, no, I mean, once I saw him, I knew who he was and read about him, but I certainly would not have known that by the name. But
he's also an infamous asshole. Like, if you just Google like Tom Savini is a dick or Tom Savini is an asshole, and you'll find forum threads from people who have met this guy at conventions and things like that and have had a bad experience with him. I actually had I have a friend of mine who saw him at Dragon Con back in the 90s, and this was before his career had really kind of gone to the levels that it is now. I think he still had some kind of cult status back then, but a friend of mine saw him at Dragon Con in the 90s, and it was just walking past him, I guess in and out of a hall or something like that. And my friend exclaims, Tom Savini, you rock. And Tom Savini goes, fuck off, asshole, and just keeps walking.
I have to ask you, what is Dragon Con?
Dragon Con's it's a convention that takes place in Atlanta. It's like a it's like a horror movie, sci-fi. I mean, it's just fantasy kind of convention. There's always a lot of cosplay. Usually there's you got people like Tom Savini, the guy that played Pinhead in the Hellraiser movies. Signing autographs, doing panels, stuff like that. Gwar played Dragon Con many times. So it's just, basically kind of it's just a fan con for, for movie, TV, comics, stuff
right,
like that.
Gotcha. I just thought this was really interesting, Brent. I like horror games. I love horror movies. I like the idea that they're doing, that they're making no bones about the fact that it's a straight homage to the Friday the 13th series.
Sure.
This actually prompted me to go out and look at, and I think I might actually put this on the docket for next week. But, Brent, I just remembered that I forgot to tell you, but we won't have a show next week.
That's so weird, because I was going to tell you we can't have a show next week.
I am taking a small vacation to Foz do Iguaçu, the widest falls in the world, or something like that, in the border of Brazil and Argentina. But PSA, folks,
that sounds awesome.
No show next week. So maybe the following week I will put this on the docket. But it made me, in looking at this and looking up games like this, I tripped over some footage, about 7 minutes of gameplay from Until Dawn, the other horror film that's coming out on the PS4, or the horror game, excuse me, in the future.
We talked about it a bit.
Yeah, there was 7 minutes of gameplay from mid-December that I don't know how I missed it, but is really, really interesting looking. And it's a very similar homage to the sort of Friday the 13th, and I just think it's very intriguing. I love this. I didn't know if it was something that you would be interested in, and I'm sure that there are listeners out there who will be interested.
It's one of those things that I'm more excited about the fact that it exists than from any actual desire to play it myself.
Well, there you go.
It's like, hey man, I'm glad you're alive. I'm glad you're around. Don't really want to hang out.
Right. It's like this show. I think most of our listeners are glad it exists, but they don't really want to listen to much of it.
Nicely done.
All right, guys, we are in the clubhouse where we pull up a chair, sit down, and discuss a relevant topic in the gaming industry today. And typically we start out the clubhouse with a poll, but this week we're not.
Don't we, though?
But we're not doing that this week, Brent.
No, that's on account of the fact that I forgot to do a poll last week. Sometimes these things slip my mind, and last week was one of those times. Of course, last week we talked about this really interesting game / interactive history lesson that's being worked on by a former Rockstar dev concerning the 1979 revolution in Iran. And if it makes you guys feel any better, even now as I recount this story, I can't imagine what I would have asked. I would have asked some kind of question about, are you excited by the idea of video games being used to teach history? And there would have been a yes, no, and then some kind of smart ass, hey, I ordered a cheeseburger answer. So right now you can do the poll in your minds, and our audience being the thoughtful, amazing people that they are, I'm sure that the majority of you would have said yes.
I was going to say, do you want to go ahead and just say coming in third place was no with 24% of the vote. Coming in second place was the cheeseburger with 32% of the vote, and coming in with a whopping 44% of the vote
was yes.
Yes.
So there are your retroactively predicted poll results, courtesy of Outlaw Gamer Radio, and it's no wonder why you're so excited that this show exists, but not all that interested in this.
That's a true story. But let's make it up to them, Brent,
so
because I think we have a really interesting topic this week. And this topic, week's topic, we're going to talk about game reviews and how games should be judged. And this topic actually came out of last week's show where I talked about Dying Light, and I made an offhand comment where I was saying something along the lines of, and I'm going to elaborate on this, but I made a comment saying, I suppose if I had to give the game a review score right now, it might be a 7 out of 10, but because there's so many technical issues and blah, blah, blah. And it was really an offhanded comment, and it was really meant to be more of just a brief comment about it's interesting, this game, how one would rate it, because it's got a lot of technical issues, but it's so much fun to play. And I'm going to talk about more time playing it in the when we hit the road today. So Rowan, one of our moderators, kind of grabbed onto that comment and started a discussion in the comments about the sort of nature of review scores of that. And I thought, this would be an interesting topic, especially with Dying Light, which is a great example of a great game to use as an example. And then in the wake of that, Brent, a couple days later, Polygon announced their introduction of provisional reviews, which is to say that they're going to start putting reviewing games provisionally. Some of their game reviews will actually say that they're a provisional review, and that score will not go to Metacritic until they've had a chance to fully test a retail version of the game after the launch of the game, include, and especially for games that rely heavily on the online component, because frequently what's happening, obviously, as we all know, games get reviewed ahead of time. It's not under real world conditions. The games come out under real world conditions, and it's a completely different experience. And so they introduced provisional reviews to sort of deal with that. And then just today, I think, I saw that Eurogamer has announced that they're dropping review scores altogether and removing themselves from Metacritic.
What do you know?
And what they said was, they cited sort of a few things. The main thrust of which for them was that games as a product have evolved to such a degree that the sort of review systems of yore are no longer feel applicable, because games are no longer something that you receive as a reviewer a week or two ahead of time. It is the same product that goes out to the consumer. The game launches, and that is the game, and it doesn't change. Now, there's games as service. Frequently, reviewers will get versions of the game that don't match up with the retail version. Games are so heavily reliable, rely so heavily upon online aspects, and we've seen this with many games like SimCity 4. Is that right? SimCity 4?
Or just, I think it was
SimCity. I'm sorry, SimCity. Destiny, Battlefield, tons of these games that rely so heavily on the online component, and when they hit the streets, their infrastructure is not ready, and it creates an experience. Drive Club is another one. So Eurogamer has said that the sort of nature of games has changed so much that they don't feel like review scores apply anymore. And they also cited the idea that exactly what I wanted to talk about at the beginning of this, which is that idea of, you have games that are like extremely technically proficient, but have terrible storytelling and acting, for example, or wonderful storytelling and acting, but have real gameplay issues or bugs that hinder the experience. And so how do you rate a game like that? And so they have decided to get rid of their games. What they're doing instead, Brent, is they have devised a system whereby, so as I said, they're removing themselves from Metacritic. And they are going to use a system of sort of badges or awards. And there are basically 3 badges or awards. One of them is essential, as in this is an essential game for any gamer to play, to have in their canon, in Eurogamer's opinion, of course. Recommended, and avoid. Those are the 3 sort of badges that a game will get. And then not every game will get those. You might also not get one.
Yeah, I was going to say that it's important to point out that not every game, according to them, is going to receive one of these badges. That there will be many games that fall, through the cracks between these recommendations, and those could be games that have have interesting things going on, but just don't quite rise to the level of a recommendation, or fall to the level of an avoid.
Right. Somewhere in between.
I guess basically if they don't have a badge, they're very firmly mediocre in some fashion or another.
Right, exactly. And so now, interestingly, as an aside, they are, however, allowing themselves to participate in the Google rating system because Google traffic is so important to them. Yeah. That they have basically said to Google, you can take our essentials and make them 5 stars. You can take our recommended, make them 4 stars. And you can take our avoids and make them 1 star. And anything else is a 3 star.
Right.
Because they want to be included in the Google system, which I think is interesting in and of itself. But
an interesting concession, certainly.
It is. So this is what I wanted to talk about, Brent. It was sort of how do games...
What do you want to talk about?
The idea of how should games be reviewed.
I think that as anybody knows who followed us from Epic Battle Axe, which is most of you, one thing that I'll say about this subject is that I've heard all of these, all of the kind of the reasoning and the logic behind these things that we're talking about right now. I heard all this 6 years ago from Daniel Kaiser. Daniel was the guy that really turned me around on the idea of review scores. Prior to meeting Daniel and talking with him about this subject at length, I was like, yeah, review scores are great, but after having many conversations with Daniel about it, he changed my mind on it, because I think that, and that was, bear in mind that was 6 years ago. That was before we got as far along as we are now. So I think pretty forward thinking on his part, but I agree that I think that review scores are not very useful to me, because the thing that I have found over the years is that the reason that people will review games the way that they do doesn't always make for a meaningful kind of reflection of the qualities of that game that I may enjoy or not enjoy, as the case may be. And that's not to say that all review scores are fundamentally flawed, or that people aren't honest, or that they're necessarily arbitrary. I remember reading an article, and I got to speak with him a little bit about this, an article from Jim Sterling back in the Destructoid days, where he was talking about how he arrived at a review score, and that's how sometimes his review score surprised even him, because they had a set criteria for how basically points would be awarded to a game based on experiences in these categories. And at the end, you just tallied it all up and it's like, okay, well, there's the review score. And I think that, it made sense to them and maybe it made sense to their readers. I don't know. But the point is that I think that Metacritic number one is, and I think Polygon also I think they're making a statement here. And I think that this is a direct result of the things that we talk about on this show from time to time, that gamers talk about on our website and many others that is discussed on other podcasts, and that is the dissatisfaction that gamers in general feel with how games are released, with the review embargo shenanigans, with the problems of review copies being based on perhaps more stable code than the actual release of the game, the retail release of the game is. All of those things that have caused us frustration and that we've talked about dozens of times over the years, both here and, of course, at Epic Battle Axe. I think that this is a direct result of Polygon and Eurogamer looking at that situation and acknowledging that their readership is not being served all that well by the way that the scores used to work. And the scores may have worked really, really well at one time, but games have just become, I think, I think they've become more complex as a medium, number one, and sometimes there is greater need for nuance than perhaps there once was, but also I think it is a reflection of the internet connected appliance that video game consoles have become, and the way that publishers and developers have exploited that to essentially put out games that really aren't quite finished until the day they release, and sometimes later.
Yeah, indeed. And Eurogamer outright, by the way, is just an aside, outright acknowledges the fact that they think Metacritic is a bad thing for the gaming industry as a whole, and that they're certainly not alone. I think I
don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, I like the idea of Metacritic in concept,
right?
But in practice, what it has done to the game industry and the way that developers and publishers kind of build a business model around Metacritic, I don't disagree with that evaluation.
Yeah, it's I don't either, and I don't think almost anyone does, honestly. I think that, and they're quick to say, like, it's not the fault of the people that started Metacritic or the site itself. It's actually a good idea.
It's a great idea.
But the way it is played out is had a negative impact. And so, I have to say, Brent, it's interesting, as I pulled up really quickly the Evolve review roundup GameSpot had put up, and currently, I think they have maybe 8 sites listed or 9 sites listed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 9 sites listed have not given a score for Evolve yet, which is
how interesting.
And all major sites: GamesRadar, Eurogamer, Polygons is provisional, Kotaku, PC Gamer, and IGN. None of those websites have given an actual score for the game yet, which I think is fantastic. That's 6 out of 9. That's 2/3 of those major sites have said, exactly, you know what, right, we recognize this is a game we've been burned too many times by this. We're not going to sort of participate in reviewing it until we can see what the actual experience is, which I think is great. So,
well, let's take that one step further for just 1 second.
Yep.
And if Metacritic, if those sites aren't putting out a review right now that Metacritic can draw upon, or perhaps just for the readership of those sites who tend to go to those review scores when trying to decide whether or not they're going to pick up a game, will this perhaps be the thing that motivates that behavior that we were talking about recently, about not buying games on day one, about waiting a day or 2 or 6 for the game to get released, get out into the wild, and for people to have an opportunity to really fairly evaluate it under real-world conditions before going out and picking it up. And I wonder if, and we've talked about that a lot of times, people are like, oh, gamers don't have the discipline for it. I wonder, though, if not having these reviews or recommendations, as the case may be, from these major outlets, I wonder if that would help motivate that behavior.
It just might. I mean, it's these big websites essentially saying, like, you should wait until we can check this out.
Yeah.
Until you buy it.
I think so.
So you know what's interesting, Brent, is so again, where this arose from was my relationship to Dying Light, and just that idea of I enumerated a number of sort of either uninteresting aspects of that game, or technical issues, substandard graphics, substandard, in my opinion, script writing and stuff like that. And but at the same time alluded to the fact that it was tons of fun to play. And so how do you rate a game like that, right? And so in thinking about this discussion, I've sort of went through Rowan's arguments and stuff that you and I have talked about before, and I hadn't really come around to what I think the answer was until, I have to say, at least at this point, what Eurogamer is doing feels like a really good solution, in my opinion. So one thing that I should add, so we talked about on the forums, and I've talked about this before publicly, the idea of rating games by how much they're worth. My friends and I talk about, when it gets down to $15, I'll buy it, or at $30, and there's an issue with that. We talked about on the forums where those $60 means something different to somebody who makes $100,000 a year and somebody who makes $30,000 a year and has a kid, right? And so that's a difficult way to quantify things. But I really like what Eurogamer is doing. So what they're doing, by the way, and I didn't mention this before, is they recognize that people want, from a review, they want the ability to look at it quickly and get a sense of, is it good or not?
Yes.
Or where they saying
you're going to talk about like the one sentence kind of
right.
summation.
So they're putting this badge or whatever it is at the top of the review, no longer at the end of the review, which I think is brilliant, because getting you to scroll down does really nothing. And if they want to serve their customer base, they're serving their customers by doing this. They're putting the badge at the top and a one sentence, they said roughly 140 characters, like a tweet essentially, summarizing their overall feelings of the game. So you can get a sense of, and frankly, Brent, this is really what I want to know from a review is, I know the difference between essential and recommended. Like, there are, to me, Red Dead Redemption is essential. Like, that's Journey is essential. These are games that I think every person on the planet should play, honestly.
Yeah.
Regardless
Borderlands might be recommended as an by comparison.
Right. I think Portal is an essential game. I mean, there's many of them, but and certainly people are going to have different feelings on this. Many people think, for example, The Last of Us is essential, and I think it's not. But and certainly there's going to be differing opinions. But I know the difference in that concept. Other than that, I kind of just want to know, like, exactly what they're doing. Do you recommend it or not? Or is this like a stay away from this at all costs, right? So, like the difference between a 7 and an 8 and an 8.9 and even a 9 to me, there are plenty of games that have received 7s or 8s from very respected outlets that I absolutely love. It doesn't have to. So the difference between a 7 and a 9 is almost irrelevant. Is it a good game? Do you recommend it? And beyond that, I also want to know if it's just so bad, like if when Rambo comes out again, Rambo 2, I would like to see that little thing that says avoid this at all costs. You know what I mean? And anything in between. I know what you're saying to me, like, you may or may not like it. There's some issues you should probably read deeper for sure to really think about whether or not you want this. I think what they're doing seems intuitively like they're hitting all the right buttons, with the one exception of, I think it's odd that they're allowing themselves to partake in the Google rating system based on this sort of philosophical flag they're planting. I understand it's a business decision and it's important for them to get traffic, so I totally understand why they're doing it. It just seems very odd to like plant this philosophical flag and 3/4 of the way through your speech on as to why you're doing that, you say, but,
Well, yes, and I mean, let's face it. I mean, the financial viability of the site, their and I don't begrudge them that, because
I
understand
not being on Metacritic is probably going to cost them some traffic.
Well, I agree with that, but so I understand, and I'm not going to beat them up for doing something that's going to keep their website online.
Absolutely,
as opposed to we believe in this principle so much, we'll fucking run our site financially into the ground. I don't I don't expect them to avoid hypocrisy at that cost.
No.
But so I can understand that. But the Metacritic thing that you just mentioned is an interesting point about, will this damage them not being on Metacritic? But I would like to propose that Metacritic could evolve in this regard to accommodate sites like Eurogamer and hopefully other sites that adopt a similar approach to reviews. And that is, as opposed to aggregating review scores simply aggregate these one-sentence summations. So very quickly, you could go to Metacritic and you could read 9 of these brief summations from Eurogamer, Polygon, and any
without,
other
without the need to see a number.
That's exactly right. Without the need to see a number, you could go and you could very quickly read 9 sentences from major gaming outlets that will tell you what they think of this game. Fantastic story, really pretty, but repetitive game mechanics and pacing can make it seem like a drudgery at times. You know, if you see 9 variations on that idea, then I think that would give you a pretty decent idea of what that game is about, and then you as a player can make a determination, I think pretty informatively, a pretty informed determination of whether or not that game is going to be a good fit for you. I think that Metacritic could evolve to incorporate that kind of feedback in addition to the traditional scoring system, and I think that everybody wins. So I don't think that I agree with you that in the short term, this could potentially hurt Eurogamer stepping away from Metacritic, but I would like to see Metacritic evolve along with sites like Eurogamer and Polygon to address the fact that review scores alone are not enough, and that way Metacritic can stay relevant moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. This is again, I think what Eurogamer is doing is extremely interesting. It is. I now, whereas I have not been historically necessarily a real big reader of Eurogamer, I have now bookmarked their review page specifically because of this interesting and I think very forward-thinking new system, and it's how I would like to receive my reviews in the future. And so I'll be curious to see how this plays out over time if other websites adopt it.
Yeah.
With that, Brent, why don't we turn it over to the audience? I would like to know what people think about how games should be reviewed. Is a number system appropriate? A star system? Do you like what Eurogamer is doing? Do you like what Polygon is doing? What do you think about how games should be reviewed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. I think it's a very, very interesting discussion, and thank you to Rowan for bringing it up.
Okay, guys, we are going to hit the road and get our hands on some actual games this week and talk about our experiences. I'm going to kick it over to Lauren to start things out. Lauren.
Yeah, so the first thing I have up on the docket this week, Brent, is a small game that came out as the PlayStation Plus free, one of the 2 free games on PlayStation Plus for February. The first of which is Transistor, which I already have, and if you don't, you should get it. It's an amazing game. The second of which is a game called Apotheon. It is a side-scrolling platformer, essentially a 2D side-scrolling platformer that is done with in the style of Greek art, of ancient Greek art and hieroglyphics, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I've seen footage of the game. It looks really fascinating.
It is really interesting. I will say. So first of all, I don't know that I've seen a game done quite like this aesthetically, and I think that is very interesting. The mechanics are. There seems to be some light RPG elements to it. The mechanics are very familiar, as you would expect, in terms of traditional side-scrolling platformers. So far, I played about an hour of the game, and you get multiple different weapons. I've had spears, I've had swords. I've had throwing weapons. They do different things, obviously. It appears to be. It doesn't. I have a feeling it's going to turn sort of Metroidvania-ish in terms of returning to places that you have been, but I haven't had that experience quite yet. But I get the sense that it will be that. So I think it's interesting. I will say, Brent, it felt a little basic to me. I don't know if I undervalue the game, maybe perhaps because it was free. I'm not sure. But it felt pretty basic to me. And after about an hour, I uninstalled the game. I am not big on side-scrolling. I know, right? I am not big on side-scrolling platformers in general. There's only
also you swine.
There's only a few. Obviously the Rayman series has grabbed me. Little Big Planet has grabbed me, and then a couple other sort of more interesting, what I consider to be more interesting versions or iterations on that, like Swapper, and what was the other one? The Outcast that I really, really liked. But other than that, I'm not someone in general. I mean, I guess Super Meat Boy. Although I feel like Super Meat Boy is sort of
it's almost more of a puzzle game in a way.
Yeah, it's a 2D side-scrolling platformer on like crack cocaine. But So I think it's interesting if it's free. Obviously, if you have the PS4 and you have PS Plus, download this game. I think for those of you that like this kind of game, I think this might be very interesting for you aesthetically, artistically. It's a beautiful looking game. It's just not necessarily my cup of tea.
I gotcha. All right. Well,
yeah,
you're forgiven.
Thank you, Brent. You've been playing some Wolf Among Us.
Again, I have been playing The Wolf Among Us as I've been detailing these last few weeks. I have finished episode 4 at this point, and I have to tell you that episode 4 left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. For me, thus far, the gameplay has peaked at episode 2. For me personally, I really, really enjoyed the detective work going on in episode 2 of The Wolf Among Us, and everything that's followed has been. I mean, there's been discovery. Don't get me wrong, and certainly the way that the conversations work within the game, you have to kind of find the right approach, the right touch with each person in order to, try and get information out of them or whatever. But the point is that I've not been as enamored of the gameplay in episodes 3 or 4. And episode 4 was short. Episode 4 was only about an hour long. So I really thought I finished episode 4 and I was just kind of like, yeah, it wasn't as good as I hoped it was. And I really thought about just pushing straight on through to episode 5 and gorging myself in a double serving of Telltale excitement. But I held off. So I'm gonna finish up the last chapter this week, so you'll have to wait 2 weeks, because as we said, we are not having a show next week. You have to wait 2 weeks to hear about that, but I'm anxious to finish the game up, and I do want to make the distinction. If I were doing a review score, see, I wouldn't be able to do this, but I want to make the distinction that I'm enjoying the story immensely. The characters, the mythology, and the underlying themes that are being explored in this game, particularly those themes that deal with alienation, with bigotry, all of the really interesting things that are kind of going on under the surface of the main narrative. I love. It's just the gameplay that I find to be thin in places. I thought that The Wolf Among Us started really, really strongly in episodes 1 and 2, and it feels like it peaked early. I've not been as enamored of what I've played since.
Was the story good enough to make you sort of forget that the gameplay was maybe a little lackluster in that particular episode?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the story, in terms of what's going on, in terms of how you're seeing characters change as you find out more information about them and your kind of relationship to them, your attitudes towards them. I love what's going on in the story. The story is what's keeping me there right now. So I'm hoping that episode 5 will kind of wrap things up in a more satisfying way, or at least more fulfilling way than 3 or 4 have been. But anyway, that's the main thing, is that I feel like the pacing in terms of gameplay, I feel like the pacing is a little bit off in terms of the fact that the mechanics that they introduced early on, they don't seem to really be utilizing so much at this point. And that's disappointing, because I really like those mechanics.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll be curious to see. I too will be curious to see sort of how episode 5 rounds it out for you.
Yeah, how it all comes together.
Indeed.
All right, so what's up next for you?
Brent, the only game I've really been playing all week this week, again, is Dying Light. Again, I go back to the fact that I'm thoroughly enjoying this game. Almost everything I've said in the previous weeks stands to be true, although the scripting is bothering me less at this point, and as are the maybe subpar in graphics inside of buildings. But the game just keeps getting better and better. I'm 25 hours into it at this point. I've completed 80. I know, right? I completed 81% of the story. It's just fun. The mechanics are fun, and the progressions, the RPG progressions and the weapons getting better and that sort of stuff are fantastic. And something I've come to discover this week, Brent, which I'm really, really excited about, is there are Easter eggs throughout this game. For example, I learned, my 11-year-old nephew told me this, and then I looked some of them up. I think, did I mention to you before on the air about the Mario level?
No, I don't think you did.
So there's a Mario. So you know, parkour is a big part of this game. You're parkouring across roofs all the time, and there's a Mario level where if you go to the right roof and you crouch down on top of a pipe that's coming out of the top of a house, you sink into it, and there's an 8-bit Mario level.
Dude, that's fantastic.
It completely looks totally 100% different from the game. It's an 8-bit level. And if you go through the level, you get like a special weapon.
Wow.
There's another one. There's another one that was called. You get a sword called EXP Caliber, I think is what it's called. And you swim out to this rock that's in the ocean, like in the middle of the ocean, that you probably would never think to swim to otherwise. You kill. You find a body laying there with a sword stuck in it, like a golden sword. And when you pick up things on the ground, you hold the square button for maybe 2-3 seconds. Well, on this one, you have to hold the button for like 2.5 to 3 full minutes to show that you have the strength to pull Excalibur out of the rock. And then you get this Excalibur sword, which does like 3 or 4 times the damage that any other sword in the game does. They do it so brilliantly. Any other sword in the game at that point. But they do it so brilliantly. So all weapons are repairable and that sort of thing. This weapon is like does tremendous damage. It's a one-hit kill at that point in the game to everything, but it's got very little durability, and it gets destroyed very quickly. But you retain the blueprint to build it, but to build it takes a lot of this particular resource that's hard to find. And so you get this weapon as a reward for this Easter egg. You get to play with it and have fun with it and be godlike for a little while. But it's not like it just totally changes the face of the game. It's really well done.
Nice little reward.
Several other things like that. I found another Easter egg to build a stink bomb, where you on the roof of one of the tower, the main tower, there's a checkerboard, and if you go back and forth to that checkerboard 5 separate times and play one of the checkers. And then you go back a 6th time, you get a blueprint for a stink bomb. But it's an Easter egg. It would be hard to sort of figure that out. There's stuff like this littered throughout the game. References to Star Trek, Star Wars, all throughout the game, which I just absolutely love in a game. And I can't wait to discover more of them. I think it's so interesting.
How fun.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. So I'm just totally enjoying the game. The game is, it's just a tremendous amount of fun, Brent. I'm really enjoying it. And I'm looking forward to, like I said, I'm 80% through the game, which for me in an open world game is very unusual this quickly. But I just spent the last hour before coming on here doing a side mission that I got totally sucked into. And I'm already sort of mentally prepared to finish the story of the game, and I don't care, and just go back and start looking for some of these Easter eggs, and because they have super cool weapons hidden throughout and special grenades, and it's really fun, Brent. And the gameplay is just fantastic. The pacing is fantastic. Really enjoying the game. I want to say one other thing about this game, which is kind of an odd thing to say, but it stands out to me, so it's really interesting. So this game has a tower climbing mechanic. Like other games do. It is not, thank God. It is not it's not climb this tower and unlock this area of the map.
Okay, so I was like, you mean like Assassin's Creed, or?
Well, it's like Assassin's Creed. It's like Far Cry 4 or Far Cry 3, in the sense that you're more like Far Cry 3 and 4 in the sense that you're climbing to the top of these like radio towers sometimes, or other towers, cranes, stuff like that. But it does not work like those games where you have to climb these towers to unlock things. There are just various missions throughout the game. Maybe there's been 4 or 5 of them to this point, where you find yourself climbing something like a tower. A radio tower. But what I wanted to say is, Brent, is that this game does it so much better than any of those other games has done. I really feel a sense of not only challenge, but also like fear of falling when playing these, which I've never felt with these other games that I've played that with.
Yeah, it's just a given you're going to go to the top.
Yeah, pretty much. And so it's really... they do a really good job of that. I know it's an odd thing to call out, but we've seen it in so many other games, and I think it's done in such a mediocre fashion in other games that when I've encountered it in this game, it's really stood out to me as being well done. So yeah, man, it's a really great combination of good combat, fun parkour, frightening at times, some brutal finishing moves, and watching, like, I've gotten weapons now where I'm at the point where I can not inconsistently slice people's heads off and their bodies just kind of like shamble about for a second trying to figure out how to die, and then they die, and it's just fantastic. It's absolutely fantastic to watch. I'm really enjoying this game, and I'm really curious to hear what other people think of it, because I haven't seen much talk about it on the website, and I'm curious for people who are playing it if they're enjoying it as much as I am. I think it's a really well done game.
Sweet. It sounds really cool. I mean, obviously I'm not playing it myself, but listening to you talk about it over the last few weeks has, I will admit, it has more than piqued my interest in, maybe picking it up on sale or trying to get it from Redbox or something like that.
You definitely should, man. It's very, I'm very surprised. I'm very pleasantly surprised, and it does have many of the genre's just, standard tropes about it, but it rises above that, in my opinion, with some really good gameplay, strong looting mechanic, and strong pacing.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep.
All right, so I guess I'll close out the road this week and talk a little bit about what I've been playing. And I tell you what I've been doing a lot of is I've been playing games on my iPad, or my new iPad, I should say. I had an iPad 2, which I was very fond of and played many a game on, but I sold it. I sold it to a friend of mine who was in need more than I, and her iPad had been lifted out of her coffee shop, I'm sad to say, and so anyway, it was just it was one of those things that I wasn't using it a lot at the time, and she had just lost hers, so I was like, yeah, what the hell, I'll go ahead and I'll sell it. I'll get another one somewhere down the road. Well, basically, I've missed my iPad every day since I sold it to my friend Sarah, and I'd really been missing it as of late, and kind of, especially with some of the games and things that are coming out, some of the things that are going to be coming out. This War of Mine, as an example, that was something I was really interested in playing on the iPad. Well, anyway, my wife surprised me with an early Valentine's Day present and gave me an iPad 2, an iPad Air 2. And it was extremely cool of her. She's an awesome lady. And since I got my iPad Air 2, I've basically just been gaming on it nonstop. I've been playing, obviously, Star Wars Commander, as I often do, but also going back and playing some of the best that gaming has to offer on the iPad, things like XCOM, things like Hitman Go, and especially the Banner Saga. I talked about playing the Banner Saga on my iPhone 6 and how I had a good experience with that. Somebody asked me specifically if they thought that playing the Banner Saga on a smaller size screen like a phone would be all that fun, and I said, yes, it's fun. It totally works at this size, completely doable, but I would be really, really excited to play this on an iPad. And I was right, because it kicks serious ass. The game looks gorgeous, and I think that the tablet is the perfect it's the perfect sort of screen size for some of these games. Banner Saga, XCOM especially look fantastic. I think Hitman Go works on the phone pretty well as it does on tablet, but I think XCOM and Banner Saga especially benefit from that tablet-sized screen. So I've been gaming my eyes out since I got my new iPad, and I'm looking forward to doing quite a bit more of that as more games come out for it, especially things like This War of Mine. I'm dying to play that on the iPad. I think that's one of those game experiences that I would relish having access to wherever I am.
Remind me, it's not yet on the iPad, right? It's coming.
No, it's not. They say on their website, they talk about the fact that they have a version for iOS that is in development. But the last time I looked, which this was going back to whenever we talked about it on the show, I can't remember. I think it was late last year, but whenever we talked about it on the show, I checked their website at that time, and they said that they were working on it, but they didn't have any kind of timeline for when it might come out.
Yeah, I think that game will play very well on the iPad as well.
I agree. So anyway, that's it, and I may have some more updates depending on what I get into in the coming weeks, and certainly what games come out. But for now, I'm really happy to have the iPad again and the ability to game on it, which there's, every single month there's more and more really good stuff to play.
That's awesome, man. There's a couple. Have you played 80 Days? Is it 80 Days?
I've not.
Have you played?
I'm not familiar with it either, so I can't tell you if the name is correct or not.
I'm pretty sure it's called 80 Days, and I think that maybe you should check it out. As well as did you play the game? I can't remember what it was called. That where you're moving yourself through the comic book panes.
Oh no, we talked about that. I can't remember the name of that, but we talked about that, and that was super cool. I'm looking at 80 Days right now. Is this is this some variation on Around the World in 80 Days?
I believe it is. I haven't. There's no an Android version, so I haven't played it yet.
Okay, I'm looking at it right now. Based on Jules Verne's classic story, 80 Days takes you around the world in a choose-your-own-adventure game that'll have you riveted. Oh, it is interesting. All right, cool. I might have to pick that up.
I'm happy I can give you games that I can't play.
Sweet.
Happy and jealous. All right,
man.
Brent, with I think that's it. I think that does it. I think with that, we're going to drive on, and we're going to turn it over to the Outlaw Gamer crew and let them comment on everything we talked about as usual, guys. Brent's iPad games, XCOM, Banner Saga, Hitman Go, anything you're playing, Dying Light, The Wolf Among Us, Apotheon. What we talked about when we were hanging out in the clubhouse, how should games be reviewed, and what your thoughts are on that topic. And then, of course, while we were out in the garage, we talked about Summer Camp announcement trailer, the Order 1886 experience, the announcement trailer for White Knight, and the new Portal mod, Portal Stories. Mel, we want to know what you guys think about those topics and anything related to gaming or the gaming industry today. We'd love to hear your comments and interact with you as usual. As we said earlier in the show a couple of times, there will not be an Outlaw Gamer Radio next week, as Brent and I will not be available, but we will be back the following week at our usual time. So with that, we will say goodbye. And as usual, here's Brent Adams. I am Lauren Baumgarten. And remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing.